Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Ali Dia. I'm the Executive Director of Ta'leef. I'm here with Dr. Will Caldwell and Sheikh Ubaydullah Evans speaking to you all about My Roman Empire.
And this is playing off of a trend going on now.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's right.
On TikTok, where people are discussing their personal moments of downfall, right? And they're on, or like something that they are highly susceptible to. In terms of like a personal weakness.
Yeah, like something that's self-destructive, just like the Roman Empire, how it fell. They say it fell from within, right?
Yeah.
Are we witnessing that now with America itself?
I think certainly we are. And I think, you know, we began by mentioning the moral component of it, but I think in many ways the moral component is a byproduct of multiple trends in our society, like political, economic, social, that are, you know, while we don't perceive them directly every single day, we certainly feel the effects, and those effects have a way of degrading our ability to act according to a consistent set of principles. And, you know, really, like the way I think about much of what's going on nowadays is, you know, an inability to, at the societal level, as a country, as a nation, to plan, prepare, and really even think about the future. The idea of, like, you know, civilization coming from the efforts of people who will, you know, plant trees that they themselves will never enjoy the shade of. We don't seem to have that any longer as a society or as a country. And you can see those effects everywhere. You know, one of the most amazing stats that just continues to blow me away is that 40% of the dollars in circulation right now have been printed since 2020. 40% of our money has been printed since 2020. And really what that's doing is, you know, however much money any one individual has, you know, you put that as like the numerator. As the denominator expands, your own savings, your wealth is divided at an increasingly rapid rate. And so you take a policy decision like that, and you think about the position that that puts an individual into, or like you don't necessarily see that taking place, but you feel it. You feel it at the grocery store, right? You feel it at the gas pump. And there's just this sense of like mounting anxiety that really starts to affect the decisions that you make on a very minute scale. And you may not connect it to something that big, but in fact it is connected. And I think we're seeing things like that just proliferate across the board in our country, such that, you know, the America that we grew up in many ways, is a thing of the past.
It reminded me of the prophetic saying, فَمَنْ قَالَ مَا أَهْلَكَ النَّاسُ وَأَهْلَكَهُمْ أَوْ أَهْلَكُهُمْ. Right, so the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever says the people are so destroyed, either in one riwayah, huwa ahlakahum, he's destroying them. Meaning it is actually his pessimism. It is his, you know, his doomsday prophesying that is contributing to the destruction of the people. Or huwa ahlakuhum, he's the most destroyed of them on account of his pessimism. This is certainly true. However, when you see clear signs of inhitat or decadence, people that have gained success or prominence or preeminence on account of certain moral commitments, on account of certain traditions that they've maintained, you know, intergenerationally, and you can see the society beginning to unravel because the ability to maintain those traditions, the ability to summon a similar kind of moral clarity and courage is diminishing among the people. And, it is completely cliche, and I recognize that, for anyone to say these are the worst of times, the end of times. People in every generation say that. If you read in the classical Islamic tradition, people were saying that, as early as the 2nd century. After the Hijrah, this is it, we've lost everything, we've lost integrity, we've lost honesty, we've lost virtue. So, I don't want to be someone who joins an obvious chorus line of people who say, it's over, these are the worst of times. However, quite a few things, I think, that characterize our society that are very concerning. As a Muslim and as an American, I say that unapologetically, as somebody that has deep investments, in this place. I'm talking about personal investments and historical investments. The blood, the tears of my people are in the soil of this land. I'm deeply concerned about it.
The Prophet ﷺ also indicated that everything has a beginning and an end, right? So he even said it with empires, right? He said that you will see the end of this generation when this boy passes away, right? Or you'll see the end of this empire when this happens or whatnot. So there's definitely a real understanding for us. Can we actually say this is the unthreading right now? A lot of people would say that I've spoken to, this is the beginning of the end of the American empire, right? Like this is the fall of Rome, if you will, right? And I'm trying to understand, as a person who's about to enter into a really interesting time in my life. I have 3 children, okay? I'm about to become 40 years old. I'm pretty settled in certain ways, right? So all these questions come up, like, am I comfortable where I'm at? Do we need a change? What's the change, right?
Mm-hmm. I think all 3 of us have 3 children. And it has to be front and center in our minds. I mean, there's no way we can't ask ourselves these questions. I think certainly an end is in sight. There's all kinds of signs that, like, the America that we grew up in is not going to be there in the same way for our children. And so I think it's absolutely appropriate, absolutely necessary as parents, but really as anyone living in these times, to be looking at these realities and asking ourselves, what does it mean for us, and how practically should we prepare for this new reality?
We're living in increasingly nihilistic times, a time in which, meaning, people living with great intentionality and great purpose. And by meaning, I don't mean like just individual kind of purpose, but grand narrative. People really seeing their lives as expressions of something bigger. This used to be, a category of meaning that people relied on understandings of the metaphysical to kind of feel their lives. I think more and more those kinds of understandings are being discredited, and people are reaching for other things. We happen to know that nothing is going to satisfy that desire for meaning except the remembrance of God. We know that. So we can actually now, with everything kind of, coming apart or unthreading, some of the other, I would say, almost like subsidiary sources of meaning are less, I actually remember when you had people that had almost embarrassingly simplistic, idealistic views on stuff like politics and the economy, and everyone's cynical now. We've really entered the realm of just absolute absurdity. So people know, okay, that can't be it. Then even with just consumption, wanting to just fill our lives and our souls with junk, I think a lot of people are actually getting to a place where it's like, okay, capitalism will continue to crank out goods and services that will attract the attention of people, but I think there is this pervasive sense that how far is this really going? I mean, another iPhone, another one. I mean, how far is this really going? And we should be there, a community of meaning, who tries to represent the ideals of Islam as attractively and as beautifully as we can to as many people as we can.
One of the amazing things about being in Ramadan, right, is that the worshiper sees themselves to change as well. So like with my Roman Empire, right, outside of Ramadan, every time I'm done with Ramadan, I feel like I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to be like this. And then slowly there's these like vices or self-destructive things inside of me, kind of like, the downfall of Rome from the inside. And then I'm feeling myself depleted and kind of falling apart until the coming of the next Ramadan. So in a way, I feel like Ramadan is a way to save us from that self-destruction.
When Allah says, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, the vicissitudes of fate, being up, being down, being prominent, being demoted, etc. These are things that happen to people. And the scariest part about being at the top of anything is there's nowhere to go but down. Where else is there to go? And this is the parallel. Our society has enjoyed unparalleled, unrivaled dominance, world dominance for, the last, 400 years, 300 years or something like that? Anyone who believed that this was going to be a permanent thing, like America is the indispensable nation, that's just political rhetoric. That's nothing. The truth is, empires rise and fall. Similarly, with regard to our personal lives, I think in the month of Ramadan, we're at the very top. Spiritually, we're at the very top. You're praying Taraweeh, you're fasting, you're engaging this very explicit experience of what it means to be committed to God, inextricably tied to like a visceral sensation, like hunger. It's a real thing. And then outside of Ramadan, I think the only place you can go is down from Ramadan. I'm just being, not to be pessimistic, but this is the reality. However, I hope with every Ramadan, my baseline goes up a little bit more. I don't expect to, in fact, one should not expect to be at a Ramadan level outside of Ramadan. If that were the case, then what would be the significance of Ramadan? But hopefully your baseline moves up a little bit more, and I think, similarly, the kind of, dominance that America has enjoyed, the West has enjoyed, I mean, they certainly shouldn't have expected it to be permanent, right? But, we'll have to see what's next.
Well, the parallel I see with Ramadan is really more in the lead up to Ramadan. No matter how many times you have fasted, I would venture to say, there is some sense of impending dread and doom at the prospect of going into a month of fasting. And it's like all of these worldly pleasures that I enjoy throughout the rest of the year are going to be stripped from me for an entire month, at least while the sun is up. And I'm really going to have to enter into a state of discipline, whether I am prepared for that or not, whether I want to or not. And that, as scary as it is, always ends up turning into a really beautiful experience, where because I've been stripped of these things, I am put into a state where I am keenly aware of my reliance upon God, which was always the case anyway. I was just more heedless of it throughout the rest of the year. But Ramadan has that way of really focusing my attention on what is real. And I think similarly, with the decline of an empire, you're looking at the prospect of losing status, losing certain assurances around quality of life, worldly pleasures. I think really When I think about my children, my main concern is they are not going to grow up with the same quality of life that I grew up with. That I'm not going to be able to provide the same things for them that my parents provided for me. But there will be a purification in whatever is to come, I think. And I think we see this already, just in the people, I would say, in the past year, who have been coming to us to learn more about Islam, who have been saying their shahada. Their reasons for doing these things are very different from when I did it, and I would imagine when you did it.
Back in the 1900s, when I did it.
Yeah, yeah, last century, right?
Yeah, last century, back in the 1900s when I accepted Islam.
And it's, they are driven by, I would say very often, concerns, questions that reflect the time that we are in. But this decline, this Roman Empire moment, you can hear it echoed in the things that they ask about. You can hear it in questions about, things that I've always taken for granted, like I can't anymore. And so now I'm looking for meaning, right? Meaning that I didn't know I was actually thirsty for, but that really, I just saw a hole in my life that had always been there, and I was finally pushed to the point of recognizing it. I think, we see it on that individual level, we're seeing it on a wider societal level, but there is beauty, there's hope in both, along with the concerns.
Yeah, and there's preparation on our end, to be honest, as we see more of these questions come up, look at what you and I spoke about not too long ago, TikTok shahadas, right? And how did that happen? People just opening up the Quran and being engaged with the Quran. They're not even Muslim, but they're reading it, and they're having thousands, if not millions of followers as they're going through their journey of reading the Quran, and then all of a sudden coming to our space and taking their shahada, right? What's happening with these questions that are causing them to open it? And one of the things that caused it for a plethora of them that have taken their shahada in the space or in the Bay was what's going on in Gaza, and how the US morally has responded or not responded in any way, shape, or form to it, which allowed them to introspect a lot, leading them to a realization how are these people responding like this, and how are we responding like this?
Yeah, no, it takes something as devastating as the crisis and genocide in Gaza and America's subsequent response to reveal the moral bankruptcy of your society. When you realize the people charged with maintaining the public trust, they have nothing to offer. We're talking basic, flat, two-dimensional, trite statements about unqualified support for Israel. It's enough to make you question other things that you've been told. I remember, watching a documentary. I love war documentaries. That's not a guilty pleasure of mine, just a pleasure. I have no guilt about it. I think we learn a lot about our society in viewing how we respond to martial conflicts. But Vietnam, one of the most interesting, military, engagements in the history of the United States. People watching the mendacity, the lies of the federal government. This began, this created certain fissures. And now, for Black Americans, it wasn't. It wasn't a revelation, that, oh my God, Richard Nixon lied. It wasn't a revelation. But for some people to watch them become aware of, the moral bankruptcy of, their government, this institution that had previously been a vaunted institution, and watching them question other things they had been told, those are light bulb moments. And for people that, our religion is, we're not in any way destructive, right? We want to be people that, are constructive, but we will not allow Islam to be domesticated, right? So for people that want to be the moral conscience of the nation, this kind of bankruptcy gives them an opportunity to talk about truth, to talk about virtue, to talk about honesty, to talk about valuing life, to talk about, how America has been, complicit and sometimes the initiator of great evil in the world. And those are spiritual openings, man.
Yeah, which means places like Ta'leef and the work that we do, we got to be prepared in the right dialogue as well, in the right place, to receive those people once that light bulb moment happens, like you were saying, inshallah. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Ali Dia. Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.